George Washington, the man who invented American power. You know the story. Consider the stakes. From an ambitious provincial surveyor, he became the general of a war that by all ordinary calculation should have been lost. From presiding over a revolution, he moved to preside over a new government with no instruction manual. His essential choices, what he did and what he refused to do, created the unwritten rules of American power, legitimacy earned rather than assumed, the military under civilian command, an executive who acts with energy and accepts limits, power transferred peacefully when the people have spoken. And, running alongside these achievements, the contradiction that cannot be tided away, he built institutions that protected liberty while personally benefiting from slavery. He imagined national unity while pursuing policies that advanced the dispossession of native nations. To understand his legacy, we must hold both truths at once: Washington as institution builder and Washington as participant in systems of injustice. He began without the advantages of the great Virginia names. Born February 22, 1732, February 11th by the old calendar, in Westmoreland County, he entered a world where lineage smoothed the path. His would be a road of effort, not inheritance. As a teenager, he became a surveyor, threading forests and fords, setting chain and compass against a continent. The work brought coin to his pocket, confidence to his bearing, and, more importantly, a way of seeing land as a tangle of interests, speculators and settlers, native polities and imperial claims, rather than mere geography. It was education in power, taught not in books but by rivers and ridgelines. At 21, Virginia's lieutenant governor sent him west to deliver a message to the French in the Ohio Valley: withdraw from lands the British claimed. The mission and the published journal thrust him into imperial politics. In 1754, he led militia into a skirmish that helped ignite the French and Indian War. Soon after, his makeshift fort Necessity fell. He signed a surrender he barely understood, learning, as young officers do, that boldness cannot always redeem inexperience. The next year, he served under General Braddock in the campaign that came to grief near the Monongahela. An ambush, a shattered column, and Washington riding through musket fire, his coat pierced by bullets, horses shot from beneath him. He learned how fragile supply can be, how swiftly fortune turns, and how prudence, not bravado, preserves an army. By 1759, he resigned his commission, married Martha Dandridge Custis, a wealthy widow, and took his place at Mount Vernon above the Potomac. The union brought property and position. The estate demanded management. Ambition demanded outlet. Both would find their moment soon enough. When protests ripened into armed conflict in 1775, the Continental Congress needed a commander who could coax jealous colonies into cooperation and turn men loyal to their counties into soldiers of a cause. Washington arrived in Philadelphia in uniform, a quiet signal of readiness. Congress appointed him commander-in-chief. Outside Boston, he took charge, and with cannon captured at Ticonderoga, laboriously hauled over ice and mud, he fortified Dorchester Heights, compelling the British evacuation in March 1776. It was a crisp success. Then the tide ran against him. In New York that summer and fall, the British outmaneuvered him from Long Island to Manhattan to White Plains. Enlistments ran out, supplies ran thin, and by December he was retreating across New Jersey with the Empire's finest army pressing his back. Here he gambled. On Christmas night, 1776, he led his weary men across the ice-choked Delaware. At dawn, Trenton, a sharp fight and Hessian surrender. Days later, Princeton, a deft stroke and withdrawal. Modest victories on the map, they were immense in the mind. The army had not dissolved. It could strike and live to fight on. Meanwhile, he began to build the systems without which courage squanders itself: more reliable supply, discipline, and the outlines of an intelligence network, the culper ring among them, carrying secrets from British-occupied New York. Survival itself became strategy. Patience, a weapon. The Valley Forge winter of 1777 to 1778 was no mythic ice age, but it was cruel enough: hunger, disease, despair. Out of that frost came steel. Baron Friedrich von Steuben, a former Prussian officer, drilled the men in formations, marching, and bayonet work, hammering disparate militia habits into a common manual of arms. In June 1778 at Monmouth, the Continental Army stood toe-to-toe with British regulars. It did not win a glittering victory, but it did not break. That mattered. He fought political battles, too. The Conway cabal, letters and whispers, suggested he be replaced by a more aggressive general. Washington answered not with spectacle but with restraint, allowing his record and the loyalty he had earned to speak. In a republic, legitimacy is as much character as it is victory, and he knew it. With French alliance secured, strategy shifted. In 1781, Washington coordinated with General Rochambeau and the French fleet to trap Lord Cornwallis at Yorktown. The siege ended in British surrender. The war would drag on in negotiation and distant skirmish, but the axis had turned. Then came the most delicate test. In March 1783 at Newborough, frustrated officers, unpaid, uncertain, murmured about coercing Congress. Washington entered their meeting, unfolded a letter, and hesitated. "Gentlemen," he said, "you will permit me to put on my spectacles, for I have not only grown grey but almost blind in the service of my country." The room softened. The crisis ebbed. Power yielded to humility. That December 23rd, in Annapolis, he resigned his commission. He returned the sword to the people. This was no mere flourish. It taught a new nation the habit that keeps republics whole, the military, subject to the civil power, even when the civil power is fractious, underfunded, and ungrateful. Back at Mount Vernon, he attempted an ordinary life with extraordinary attentiveness. He experimented with crop rotations, diversified beyond tobacco, and pushed to improve navigation on the Potomac, believing commerce might knit the states into something sturdier than sentiment. But the Articles of Confederation faltered. Congress could not tax effectively. States squabbled. Shays' Rebellion in Massachusetts rattled the country. The Revolution, he feared, might decay into anarchy or summon a would-be savior to bury liberty and order. In 1787, he was called to preside over the Constitutional Convention. He was not the most talkative delegate, but he was the indispensable one, the steady presence upon which compromise could rest. The Constitution they drafted created a stronger national government with checks and balances, a separate executive and judiciary. It was a scaffold. It needed builders. No one could sell that scaffold to a skeptical public like Washington. He did not seek the presidency. It sought him. In 1789, the Electoral College unanimously chose him. On April 30th, 1789, at Federal Hall in New York, he took the oath. There was no settled protocol, no certain path. He chose the title Mr. President, rejecting noble trappings that would have flattered his vanity and betrayed the experiment. He toured the states to embody unity. He made the presidency visible but not royal. He assembled an executive team of strong minds and strong wills. Alexander Hamilton at Treasury, Thomas Jefferson at State, Henry Knox at War, Edmund Randolph as Attorney General. He did not pretend harmony where none existed. He welcomed the contest of ideas and made the cabinet a practice, not a constitutional command, as central to governing as any clause. He signed the Judiciary Act of 1789, structuring federal courts. He urged Congress to consider amendments defining key rights. By 1791, the Bill of Rights stood in the Constitution, protecting speech, religion, assembly, the press, and due process. Hamilton advanced a daring financial system, fund the national debt at face value, assume state debts to bind the states in common obligation, and charter a national bank to stabilize credit and currency. Jefferson and Madison saw in it danger, centralization, speculation. Washington solicited written opinions, measured, and sided with Hamilton, signing the Bank Bill in 1791. Public credit steadied. In a consequential bargain, the Residence Act placed the permanent capital on the Potomac, the city that now bears his name, while Philadelphia served as a temporary seat. And abroad the world was on fire. The French Revolution, once admired, had spilled into war with Britain. Washington faced immense pressure to take sides. He chose time. The proclamation of neutrality in 1793 was not indifference but design. meant to shield the Republic while it found its footing. The French minister, Citizen Jenner, tried to outfit privateers in American ports and rally Americans to France's cause. Washington shut the effort down and demanded his recall. Neutrality, carried with firmness. Neutrality had a price. The British Navy seized American ships trading with France. The public clamored for war. Washington sent Chief Justice John Jay to London. The 1794 Treaty J returned with required British evacuation of posts in the northwest and created commissions to settle debts and spoliations. It did not end all seizures and enraged many. Effigies burned. Washington signed anyway, calculating that a decade of peace would be dearer than the satisfaction of righteous fury. Trade surged. Meanwhile, the 1795 treaty with Spain, Pinckney's Treaty, secured navigation of the Mississippi and the right of deposit at New Orleans, a vital artery for Western farmers. At home, the Whiskey Rebellion tested the government's resolve. An excise tax on distilled spirits, designed in part to raise revenue and reinforce federal authority, struck frontier producers hard. In 1794, protests in western Pennsylvania turned violent. Washington issued proclamations, then federalized nearly 13,000 militiamen from several states, riding partway to oversee the mobilization. The show of force ended the rebellion without a great battle. 2 men were convicted of treason. Washington pardoned them both. The lesson was clear. The Republic could enforce its laws, and it could temper justice with mercy. Beyond the Appalachians, conflict simmered into open war. The United States claimed the Northwest Territory. Native nations formed a confederacy to defend their homelands. In 1791, U.S. troops under General Arthur St. Clair suffered a disastrous defeat, among the worst in American military history. Washington demanded accountability, reformed supply and training, and turned to General Anthony Wayne. Wayne drilled a disciplined Legion of the United States for a year. In 1794, at Fallen Timbers near present-day Toledo, his troops routed the Confederacy. The Treaty of Greenville the next year compelled large land cessions in Ohio, opening the region to American settlement. Washington's rhetoric emphasized civilization and trade as pathways to coexistence. The outcome, however, was dispossession. The policies of his administration set a trajectory in which treaties often followed military defeat, and promises of protection yielded to pressure for land. Nation building for the United States meant profound loss for native nations. Neutrality had a price. As war engulfed Europe between Britain and revolutionary France, American trade suffered. The British Navy seized U.S. merchant ships trading with French ports, violating American sovereignty and enraging the public. Calls for war echoed across the states. Yet President George Washington, determined to preserve the fragile new republic, chose diplomacy over confrontation. In 1794, he sent Chief Justice John Jay to London to negotiate a resolution. The resulting **J Treaty ** was controversial. It secured the British evacuation of frontier posts in the Northwest Territory, long occupied in violation of the 1783 Treaty of Paris, and established commissions to settle pre-revolutionary debts and disputes over seized ships. But it failed to stop British impressment of American sailors or protect neutral trade rights. When Jay returned with the agreement, many Americans exploded in fury. Effigies of Jay and Treasury Secretary Alexander Hamilton were burned in city squares. Republicans, led by Thomas Jefferson and James Madison, denounced the treaty as a capitulation to British power. Yet Washington, weighing the costs, signed it anyway. He believed that securing a decade of peace, time to grow, to strengthen, to build, was worth the bitter taste of compromise. His calculation proved pragmatic. War was avoided, commerce rebounded, and the young nation gained crucial breathing room. The following year, another diplomatic triumph bolstered American prospects. Pinckney's Treaty with Spain in 1795 secured the right to navigate the Mississippi River and guaranteed American access to the port of New Orleans through the right of deposit, lifelines for Western farmers and a major step toward westward expansion. At home, the federal government faced its first test of internal authority. In 1791, Congress imposed an excise tax on distilled spirits to help pay down national debt, a policy central to Hamilton's financial system. For farmers on the frontier, distilling excess grain into whiskey was not just profitable, it was practical. The tax felt punitive, arbitrary, and oppressive. Protests in western Pennsylvania escalated into violence. Tax collectors were tarred and feathered, federal officials threatened, and talk of secession surfaced. In 1794, Washington responded with resolve. He issued a presidential proclamation demanding compliance, then took the unprecedented step of federalizing nearly **13,000 militiamen from 4 states, the largest army the U.S. had yet assembled in peacetime. Riding partway with the troops, Washington made a powerful statement. The Constitution would be upheld by force if necessary. The rebellion collapsed without a major battle. 2 men were tried for treason and sentenced to hang, only to be pardoned by Washington himself. The lesson was clear. The federal government had the power to enforce its laws, but also the discretion to show mercy. Order had been preserved, and the Union affirmed, by both strength and clemency. Beyond the Appalachian frontier, peace was more elusive. Native nations in the Northwest Territory, Shawnee, Miami, Delaware, Wyandotte, and others, had formed a confederacy to resist American encroachment. They rejected U.S. claims to their ancestral lands and fought to maintain sovereignty. In 1791, the U.S. suffered a devastating defeat. Under General Arthur St. Clair, American forces were ambushed and routed. Over 600 soldiers killed, one of the worst military disasters in American history. Washington was outraged but resolute. He demanded accountability, reformed Army supply and training, and appointed General Anthony Wayne known for his discipline and tenacity. Wayne spent nearly 2 years drilling a professional force, the Legion of the United States. In August 1794, he met the Native Confederacy at the Battle of Fallen Timbers near present-day Toledo. His well-trained troops broke the alliance and destroyed their supply base. The decisive victory forced tribal leaders to the negotiating table. The Treaty of Greenville, 1795, compelled the cession of much of modern-day Ohio and opened a floodgate of American settlement. Washington spoke of peace through civilization and commerce, but the reality was conquest. His administration's policy set a lasting precedent. Native sovereignty would be recognized only after defeat, and treaties would often amount to terms of surrender, not mutual agreement. For the United States, it was nation-building. For indigenous peoples, it was the beginning of systematic displacement. And then the contradiction that shadows the entire portrait. Slavery. Mount Vernon relied on the labor of hundreds of enslaved men, women, and children, field hands, skilled artisans, domestic servants. Washington benefited from their forced labor, managed their work, and upheld the system of bondage. While serving as president in Philadelphia, he deliberately rotated enslaved household members in and out of Pennsylvania every 6 months to avoid triggering the state's gradual emancipation law, which granted freedom to enslaved people residing there for more than 6 continuous months. In 1796, owner Judge an enslaved woman who had served Martha Washington since childhood, seized a moment. She escaped to New Hampshire while the Washingtons were in Philadelphia. When news reached Mount Vernon, Washington, still president, quietly used federal contacts and personal networks to pursue her return. Owner Judge evaded capture, later giving interviews in which she declared her motivations. "Though life in freedom was hard, I am determined to be free," she said, "and I cannot return to bondage." In another, she stated plainly, freedom, even in poverty, is preferable to slavery. Washington never recaptured her. Yet he never questioned the legitimacy of slavery in public. Though he would later express private doubts, calling slavery evil and a moral and political evil, he took no action to end it during his lifetime. In his will, he provided for the emancipation of the enslaved people he owned personally, over 120 individuals, after Martha's death, a rare act among the founders. But even then, he could not free the dower slaves those held by Martha's estate from her first husband's inheritance, many of whom remained in bondage after his death. Thus, the man who stood for liberty, who twice relinquished power to uphold Republican ideals, was also a slaveholder who fought to keep a woman in chains. He helped create a nation that proclaimed all men are created equal, while living a life that denied that truth to hundreds. The paradox is not incidental, it is central. By the time Washington stepped down in 1797, he had done what few leaders in history have done, voluntarily surrender power after setting the course of a new government. His presidency had stabilized the nation, established federal authority, and steered clear of foreign war. But deep divisions were forming: the rise of political parties, the entrenchment of slavery, westward expansion at native expense. His farewell address warned against permanent alliances, sectionalism, and the spirit of party, but the tide was already rising. The Union he preserved in its infancy carried within it forces that would one day threaten to break it apart. Washington's legacy is not one of perfection, but of paradox. He was a man of action and restraint, of power and principle, whose decisions forged a nation while failing to confront its deepest moral flaw. We remember him not because he was flawless, but because he was foundational, because his choices, for better and worse, helped shape the American story. To honor George Washington is not to erase the contradictions, but to face them. For in understanding them, we come closer to understanding not just the founding, but the ongoing struggle to build a republic worthy of its ideals, where liberty is not reserved for some, but guaranteed for all.